The real Emma Coronel was never just the wife of El Chapo. She was something the world wasn't ready for. Something that didn't fit neatly into the story the cameras were telling. And for years, nobody pushed hard enough to find out what was hiding underneath that image of the beautiful, composed woman sitting in the courtroom gallery.
Chapo's wife lived a life of luxury during...
While Mexican drug kingpin El Chapo's wife has been released from prison.
She helped run El Chapo's multi-billion-dollar cartel.
While her husband's billion-dollar criminal empire got dissected piece by piece in front of a federal jury, the media made their choice early. They decided she was the wife, full stop, and they ran with it so hard and so long that the real question about Emma Coronel never got asked out loud. Not who she was married to, but who she actually was. And here's the thing. The answer to that question is not what you think it is. Because the version of Emma Coronel that federal investigators were building a case around was not the glamorous, untouchable woman the cameras chased down courthouse steps. It was someone who, according to prosecutors, had been moving inside the Sinaloa cartel in ways that had nothing to do with being a loyal wife. Someone who allegedly knew things, communicated things, and did things that placed her not beside the organization, but inside it. And the evidence they used to make that argument, I assure you, it is the kind of detail the media conveniently avoided talking about, the kind that changes everything you thought you understood about who Emma Coronel really was. But amidst all of that, the federal case, the criminal allegations, the world that was closing in on her, Emma Coronel did one thing that almost nobody saw coming. One move so unexpected that it permanently rewrote what her name stands for. And it had nothing to do with El Chapo, and everything to do with a woman who decided she was done being defined by someone else's story. Now, she's back, and the world is watching her again, not in a courtroom, not in handcuffs, but in places and in ways that make everything about her story even more complicated than it already was. Stay with us, because the real Emma Coronel was never just the wife, and by the time this is over, you'll understand exactly why. To understand Emma Coronel, you have to understand the world she entered when she married Joaquin Guzman Loera. She was born in 1989 near San Francisco, California, which gave her United States citizenship by birth. But she grew up in Canelas, a remote town in the mountains of Durango, Mexico, deep inside territory where the Sinaloa cartel's influence was not simply present, but foundational to daily life. Her family had ties to that world long before El Chapo ever appeared in her life. And so when Guzman, decades her senior, pursued her at a local festival when she was a teenager, this was not a collision between two separate worlds. She was already inside his. The marriage that followed placed her at the center of an extraordinary network. By the time of their relationship, El Chapo was regularly described by U.S. law enforcement as one of the most powerful drug traffickers in the world. The Sinaloa cartel under his leadership had built transnational smuggling infrastructure that moved cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, and marijuana into the United States at a scale that generated billions of dollars annually. The world Emma Coronel inhabited was built on money, secrecy, violence, and constant surveillance from law enforcement agencies on both sides of the border. For years, the public image of Emma Coronel was shaped almost entirely by a single recurring visual: her courtroom appearances during El Chapo's 2019 federal trial in Brooklyn, New York. She attended regularly, dressed impeccably every single time, and media coverage devoted an extraordinary amount of attention to her clothing choices. Her composure and the way she carried herself through proceedings that were, by any measure, the most consequential criminal trial in the history of the Sinaloa cartel. She became, in a strange cultural moment, something close to a celebrity, not because of what she said, 'cause she said almost nothing publicly during that period, but because of what she represented visually. She was the human contrast to everything happening inside that courtroom. Witnesses were describing mass murder, torture, corruption, and drug shipments measured in tons. And sitting in the gallery, perfectly still and perfectly dressed, was this woman who looked like she had walked off a runway. Fashion publications wrote about her outfits. Photographers competed for the best shot of her leaving the courthouse. Social media accounts ran commentary on her demeanor like it was a performance. And the most remarkable thing about all of it was that the coverage worked. People who had no interest in cartel prosecutions or drug trafficking law tuned in to the El Chapo trial, at least in part because of her. She made it watchable in a way that had nothing to do with the evidence and everything to do with image. But image, as federal prosecutors would eventually demonstrate, was never the whole story. But here's where things get complicated. While that image was being constructed through cameras and commentary, federal investigators were building a much different portrait behind the scenes. According to prosecutors, and the record established through her own guilty plea, Emma Coronel was not simply present in El Chapo's life as a spouse. She allegedly served as a messenger and intermediary between Guzman and members of his organization. From 2012 to early 2014, prosecutors alleged she relayed messages helping him conduct drug trafficking operations. After El Chapo was arrested by Mexican authorities in February 2014, she continued to visit him in prison. And according to investigators, she continued passing messages to people operating the cartel on the outside during those visits. She was, in the prosecution's framing, a functioning conduit in a criminal enterprise that did not stop moving simply because its leader was behind bars. Now listen closely, because what comes next is the detail that permanently reframed everything about her public image. In July 2015, El Chapo escaped from Mexico's Altiplano maximum security federal prison. Not through a gate, not through a bribed official walking him out the door, but through a tunnel. A tunnel approximately 5 feet high and nearly 3 feet wide, equipped with ventilation, a modified motorcycle on rails, and lighting that ran from a construction site near the prison directly beneath the facility's floor to emerge inside El Chapo's cell. The engineering alone was extraordinary. The planning required to execute it without detection inside one of Mexico's most secure facilities represented a level of operational sophistication that stunned law enforcement around the world. And prosecutors alleged that Emma Coronel was part of making it happen. According to evidence presented in her criminal case, she helped facilitate the escape in at least 2 significant ways. She brought messages from Guzman to the group planning the breakout, using her prison visits as a vehicle for those communications. And she allegedly helped get a GPS-enabled watch to El Chapo inside the facility, smuggled to him disguised as a food item, so that his associates on the outside could track his precise location within the prison and calibrate the tunnel's construction accordingly. That watch was not a detail. That watch was the mechanism by which the tunnel builders could ensure they were digging toward the right cell. Without it, the precision required to reach him was essentially impossible. With it, the entire operation became solvable. To put into context just how significant prosecutors considered this evidence, you cannot help engineer an escape from a maximum security prison through a miles-long tunnel without access, trust, money, and knowledge of how the operation works. The GPS watch was not something a passive observer would have known to acquire or deliver. It required proximity to the planning. Investigators viewed Emma Coronel's alleged role in that escape as one of the clearest demonstrations that she understood his operation from the inside, not as an uninvolved family member watching events unfold from a distance. The escape itself became one of the most sensational stories in recent organized crime history. El Chapo rode out of Altiplano on a modified motorcycle through that tunnel and disappeared into Mexico for months before being recaptured in January 2016. He was eventually extradited to the United States in 2017, stood trial in Brooklyn, and was convicted in February 2019. Sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years, he is currently confined at Adex Florence, the federal supermax facility in Colorado. He will not be leaving. That outcome is permanent. But Emma Coronel's outcome would eventually be a different story entirely. On February 22, 2021, Emma Coronel Aspuro was arrested at Dulles International Airport in Virginia. She was taken into custody on a criminal complaint charging her with conspiracy to distribute cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, and marijuana for importation into the United States. She made her initial appearance the following day in U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. Federal prosecutors had been building toward this for years. The public record from El Chapo's trial had already surfaced witness testimony describing her alleged role in the organization and the escape, and investigators had been assembling the case around her own conduct long before the handcuffs came out at Dulles. But her arrest still landed with real force. This was no longer a theory or a rumor or something implied in someone else's trial testimony. This was a federal criminal complaint with her name on it, her conduct listed inside it, and the full weight of the United States government behind it. On June 10, 2021, Emma Coronel appeared before United States District Judge Rudolph Contreras in Washington, D.C., and pleaded guilty to 3 federal counts: conspiracy to distribute narcotics for importation into the United States, conspiracy to launder narcotics proceeds, and illegal financial dealings related to her husband's property under the Foreign Narcotics Kingpin Designation Act. Speaking through a Spanish translator, she confirmed her plea was voluntary. "I accepted my guilt," she later said publicly, "and I'm good with that." Her sentencing took place in November 2021. Prosecutors had asked for 4 years in federal prison. The court sentenced her to approximately 36 months. She served roughly 31 months before transitioning into a halfway house and community confinement phase, and she was released from federal custody in September 2023. At that point, she was placed under 4 years of supervised release, ordered to turn over $1.5 million to the government, and required to comply with the conditions a federal court sets for someone coming out of a narcotics conspiracy conviction. She was not free without strings attached. But she was free, and she was in the United States, and El Chapo was not. The contrast with El Chapo's situation could not be starker. He will spend the remainder of his life in a supermax cell. She walked out of federal custody in the fall of 2023 and began rebuilding. That difference is not simply a matter of law. It is a fundamental divergence in trajectory that shapes everything that comes after. He is finished as a public figure in any meaningful sense. She is not. And Emma Coronel wasted no time making that clear. She did not disappear. She did not retreat quietly into private life and wait for the world to forget. Instead, she began constructing a second public identity, one built not around the man she had married, but around herself as a figure in fashion, social media, entertainment, and documentary storytelling. The transformation was deliberate, visible, and remarkably fast. The first major signal came in September 2024, when Emma Coronel made her international modeling debut at Milan Fashion Week. She walked for designer April Black Diamond at the historic Palazzo Serbelloni, a residence once connected to Napoleon during his time in Italy. The symbolism of the setting was almost too precise to have been accidental. A grand, centuries-old European building, white gowns from the brand's Spring-Summer 2025 collection, and opening and closing the runway, a woman who had pleaded guilty in a federal courtroom 3 years earlier to drug trafficking and money laundering charges tied to the Sinaloa cartel. The imagery generated enormous international attention. Publications across Europe, the United States, and Latin America covered the appearance extensively. The cognitive dissonance was impossible to ignore. The same person who had spent years in federal custody was now walking high-fashion runways in Milan. Designer April Black Diamond described the choice in terms of strength, courage, and hope, framing Emma Coronel as a symbol of resilience. Coronel embraced the moment fully, opening and closing the show while documenting every step for her social media following. She was accompanied by Marielle Caln, her former defense attorney, who had also pivoted into entertainment as a regional Mexican singer and was walking in the same show. That relationship between Coronel and Caln is worth understanding. Marielle Caln had been a key figure in the legal defense of Guzman and his family, and after both cases concluded, she reinvented herself as a regional Mexican music artist, describing herself as the first Puerto Rican female artist in that genre. The two women have remained publicly close, a pairing that connects the legal world of the cartel era with the entertainment world Emma is now building inside. The Milan moment was followed by a string of public appearances that, taken together, tell a very specific story about where El Chapo's ex-wife has been choosing to show up and who she has been choosing to show up with. In May 2026, she was posting gym and fitness content from California, workouts, lifestyle shots, the kind of material that an influencer builds a brand around, all of it casual on the surface and loaded with subtext underneath. 'Cause this was not just any woman posting from a gym. This was a woman who had pleaded guilty to federal drug trafficking charges 3 years earlier, now presenting herself to the world as a fitness and lifestyle figure without a single federal courtroom in sight. But the gym content was just the beginning of where Emma Coronel was being spotted. She has also been seen at El Farallon, an event center where she has appeared publicly alongside Marielle Caln, her former defense attorney turned regional Mexican singer. These appearances placed the two women together in an entertainment and nightlife context, a combination that is notable not just for who Emma is, but for who Caln has become. A figure moving between the legal world that once surrounded El Chapo's family and the entertainment world that Emma is now actively building her presence inside. Every time those two appear together publicly, it blurs the line between the cartel-adjacent past and the celebrity-facing present in a way that is impossible to ignore. Then came July 12, 2026, and Bellico Fest at BMO Stadium in Los Angeles, a regional Mexican music festival built around corridos tumbados, música blica, norteño, and banda, a genre world where the mythology of organized crime and narco-corrido storytelling have been intertwined for decades. Emma attended as a VIP guest of April Black Diamond, the same designer from Milan, and then she was on stage in front of thousands of people. She took the microphone and said, "How is my people from Mexico doing? How is my people from Sinaloa doing? And Guerrero, Jalisco, Michoacán, Durango?" The crowd erupted. She sang, she danced, she documented every moment across her Instagram stories. Performers included Tito Double P, Gerardo Ortiz, and Santa Fe Clan, and she was photographed speaking with Gerardo Ortiz, an artist who has himself drawn law enforcement scrutiny over alleged associations with organized crime. The VIP area where she spent the night was called The Vault, and a commemorative plaque inside it read, "Emma Coronel. Marielle la Abogada. Para la Cultura." Now here's the part that actually demands attention. None of these spots, not the gym in California, not El Farallon, not Bellico Fest, prove that Emma Coronel is currently involved in any criminal activity. But the pattern of where she is being seen, who she is being seen with, and the cultural worlds she is choosing to move through creates a picture that critics have found difficult to look past. Narco corrido music is historically built around the mythologizing of cartel figures and organized crime narratives. For a woman who pleaded guilty to a Sinaloa cartel conspiracy to appear on stage at that kind of festival, greeting crowds state by state from Sinaloa, Durango, and Guerrero, is not something that happens in a vacuum. It is a choice, and choices tell you something about a person, even when you cannot prove what that something is. But ironically, being spotted everywhere is not evidence of criminality. It is evidence of visibility, and visibility has become Emma Coronel's primary currency. Her documentary work has added yet another layer. In November 2025, Oxygen True Crime aired Married to El Chapo, Emma Coronel Speaks, a 2-hour special also available on Peacock, where she reflected on her relationship with Guzem, addressed her time in federal custody, and grappled publicly with her own accountability. She said she accepted her guilt and was good with it. She said she never saw the billions attributed to El Chapo's fortune. And she said she was focused on building her own name, which is precisely what she has been doing everywhere she has been spotted since walking out of federal custody in September 2023. For years, her story was told by prosecutors, agents, and journalists working from criminal complaints. Now she is the one deciding what gets said, and where, and how. So was Emma Coronel ever just the wife? The evidence says no. And not in a subtle way. Her 2021 guilty plea established this definitively. She admitted before a federal judge that she participated in a drug trafficking conspiracy and a money laundering conspiracy connected to the Sinaloa cartel. That is a documented legal finding, not an allegation. The prison escape evidence further demonstrated the degree to which prosecutors believed she had operational knowledge and played an active facilitative role. The GPS watch detail alone speaks to a level of logistical involvement that goes far beyond the role of a spouse who was simply present while criminal activity happened around her. But it is equally important to be precise about what her case did and did not establish. Emma Coronel was not convicted of being the head of the Sinaloa cartel. She was not convicted of ordering violence or directing its core trafficking operations. She was convicted of participating in a conspiracy. Her specific conduct, as established through her plea and the surrounding record, involved carrying messages, facilitating communications, and playing a role in one of the most dramatic prison breaks in recent history. That is serious criminal conduct. It is also not the same as running a cartel. The cartel itself operated through layers of hierarchy, violence, and coordination across multiple countries involving hundreds of individuals. Emma Coronel's role within that structure was significant enough to warrant federal prosecution and a 36-month sentence. It was not significant enough to place her anywhere near the top of the organization's command structure. And here's something worth understanding about what it actually means to be convicted as a cartel conspirator in a case like this one. Prosecutors do not need to put you in the room where the drugs were packaged or prove you personally counted the money. They establish conspiracy through communications, phone calls, visits, messages passed between people. They establish it through meetings, through financial activity, through the transfer of information to people who are actively running the operation. If you are the one carrying the message from the man at the top to the people on the ground, you are part of the conspiracy. If you are the one getting a GPS watch to a prisoner so his associates can dig a tunnel to the right cell, you are part of the conspiracy. That is how federal law works. And that is precisely the legal framework that Emma Coronel's own guilty plea was entered under. She was not a bystander who got swept up by association. She was a participant whose conduct had operational consequences. And that contradiction between what Emma Coronel was alleged to have done and the image she projected while doing it is one of the most persistent and genuinely difficult things about this entire story. You see, the glamour was never separate from the world she was operating inside. It was part of it. The Sinaloa cartel at its peak was not purely a story of violence and poverty. It generated extraordinary wealth, and that wealth created a culture around it: luxury, fashion, status, access, that attracted people and insulated its key figures from looking like what they actually were. El Chapo himself was known for a lifestyle that mixed brutal pragmatism with ostentatious displays of power and resources. The world Emma Coronel inhabited, and the image she cultivated inside it, was not accidental. It was the aesthetic face of an organization built to be invisible from the outside, while operating at enormous scale on the inside. So when the media looked at Emma Coronel and saw glamour, they were not wrong about what they were seeing. They were just wrong about what it meant. Now here's something worth separating cleanly, because it matters for understanding where she stands today. Celebrity and influence are not the same thing, and in Emma Coronel's case, that distinction is significant. Being highly visible, being photographed, covered by media, recognized at public events, does not mean a person has retained operational power inside an organization. Emma Coronel's current public appearances, the fashion shows, the festival stages, the documentary interviews, the gym content, do not in themselves demonstrate that she remains connected to the Sinaloa cartel's operations. What they demonstrate is that she has built a public profile, and that profile is generating attention. Those are different things. Her documented post-prison career is built around modeling, social media, entertainment, and personal branding. That is what the evidence of her current life actually shows. The past is established by her guilty plea. The present is a different story, and conflating them produces a picture that is more dramatic than it is accurate. Now here's where it gets genuinely interesting as an analytical question. Does the reinvention she is currently pursuing represent something legitimate, or does it represent something more complicated? Consider the full arc of what has happened. Federal prosecution, guilty plea, prison sentence, and then Milan Fashion Week. Gym content from California. Bellicofest on the stage at BMO Stadium. A television documentary where she controls the interview. A supervised release petition filed by her defense in early 2026 asking a federal court in Washington to end her supervision early because it was, in her attorney's framing, limiting her opportunities as a public figure and influencer. Supporters of Emma Coronel would argue she served her time, accepted accountability, and is now exercising her right to rebuild lawfully. Critics would argue that the celebrity visibility she is generating transforms a serious criminal past into a marketable commodity, and that showing up at a narco corrido festival to greet crowds from Sinaloa is not a politically neutral act. Both positions exist, and both have weight. But what is harder to dispute is the central irony sitting at the heart of all of it. The Sinaloa cartel was built on invisibility, hidden tunnels, encrypted messages, people who moved through the world without leaving a public trace. El Chapo spent years perfecting the art of disappearing. And now, the most publicly recognizable person to come out of that world is his ex-wife, who is showing up everywhere and documenting every second of it. The cartel world was about hiding. Her new world is about being seen. Step back and look at the full distance this story has traveled. A teenager from the mountains of Durango marries the world's most powerful drug trafficker, allegedly carries his messages, helps engineer his escape from a maximum security prison, gets arrested at Dulles Airport, pleads guilty before a federal judge, serves federal time, walks out in September 2023, and then Milan, California, El Farallon. Bellicofest on stage at BMO Stadium. The Oxygen documentary. The petition to end federal supervision early. The The collaboration with Marielle Calm. The social media presence built around fashion, fitness, and entertainment. That is not a small arc. That is one of the most extraordinary personal transformations to come out of the entire era of organized crime in the Americas. The phrase "never just the wife" carries two meanings in this story. The first is historical. Federal prosecutors established that her role went beyond marriage. Her guilty plea confirmed she participated in criminal conspiracies connected to the Sinaloa cartel, and the prison escape evidence demonstrated that her involvement required operational knowledge, active facilitation, and a level of trust inside that organization that a passive spouse simply does not get. She was not standing beside a drug lord. She was functioning inside his world in ways that federal law holds people accountable for. The second meaning is right now. Emma Coronel is no longer presenting herself through her relationship with Guzman. She is being spotted at gyms in California, at El Farallon with Marielle Calm, on stage at Bellicofest in Los Angeles, on runways in Milan, and on television screens where she is finally speaking in her own voice. The Oxygen special is called Married to El Chapo, but what she is doing inside it is something she could not do during the trial or during the prosecution. She is speaking first, framing the story, deciding what the world gets to see. Reinvention does not erase what happened, but serving a sentence and rebuilding a public life are genuinely different from continuing criminal activity, and nothing in her documented post-prison appearances establishes that. What it establishes is something far more unusual. A woman once embedded in one of the most secretive criminal organizations on earth, who is now building her entire career around being seen. And here's something no one actually talks about. The same organization that depended on invisibility, on hidden tunnels and encrypted messages and people who moved through the world without leaving traces, produced a woman who is now one of the most publicly visible figures to come out of that entire era. El Chapo is never leaving Adex Florence. Emma Coronel is on stage at BMO Stadium, asking a crowd of thousands how her people from Sinaloa are doing. Whether that is genuine reinvention, calculated rebranding, or simply the next chapter in one of the most complicated stories the Sinaloa cartel ever generated. That is a question only Emma Coronel knows the answer to, and she has made it very clear she will tell that story on her own terms, in her own time, and in whatever room she decides to walk into next.